Everybody ready? Is Kelly ready?
You ready, Kelly? You ready? You ready? Are you ready?
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this regular board meeting of the Perrysburg School Board Monday, August 15th to order. Mr. Drew, your roll call, please.
Ms. Larimer.
Here.
Mrs. Eubank.
Here.
Dr. Reffert.
Here.
Mr. Pullman.
Here.
Mr. Bennington.
Here. I ask that everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I will start with the safety briefing. Perrysburg Schools welcomes you to the Commodore Building, and thank you for attending tonight's board meeting. We care about the safety of our students, staff, families, and guests. Please note that there are exits on the east and west sides of the cafeteria. In case of an emergency, an AED is located just outside the cafeteria. You are located at 140 East Indiana Avenue. Thank you for your support of Perrysburg Schools. Before we get started, I would also like to note that tonight's meeting is not being live streamed due to technical issues, but it will be recorded as soon as this meeting is over. So we have the agenda in front of us today. It will include two opportunities for public participation. Superintendent's report will go over our public opinion survey. We'll hear the treasurer's report and then take care of some consent agenda, hiring and other contract activities. So I will talk more about public participation when we get to that part of the agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So move.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Pullman, Ms. Larimer, and roll call, please.
Mr. Pullman.
Yes.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Mrs. Eubank.
Yes.
Dr. Reffert.
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. Okay, that takes us into our first session for public participation. This section will be for agenda items only. I would like a couple of reminders. One, this section will be given 15 minutes in total time, 3 minutes per speaker. We ask if you have anything to hand over to the board, you present it to one of the administrators in the back rather than coming up to the table to give it to us. They will make sure that we get it for consideration in the future. I also want to read a kind of a statement from our policy. So the Perrysburg Board of Education is aware that some of you are wishing to address the board today about some sensitive topics. The other board members and I will be attentive to those speakers. I do want to share a reminder with those addressing the board this evening that the district does not allow individuals during the public comments portion of the meeting to either name a student or refer to a student in such a way that the student can be personally identified. Under the Family Education Right to Privacy Act, the board must protect all students' privacies. We appreciate your cooperation. So it appears I have 3 speakers specific to agenda items. And the first will be Ms. Thistlethwaite. If you please come to the podium, state your address and your relationship to the district, and you will have 3 minutes once you begin.
My name is Carrie Thistlethwaite. I live on Roachton Road. We now have only 3 children in the district, as we have transferred our youngest out this year. Last November, I addressed the board for the first time regarding concerns I had about the disconnect I personally experienced between the administration and the parents in this district, after having to fight for my right as a parent to simply opt my child out of a third-party survey. Our board policy manual clearly states that the district recognizes and values parents and families as the children's first teachers and decision makers in education. But that has not been my experience at all. The mission of this district is ensuring all students achieve their greatest potential. It's impossible to achieve this mission without consideration of what parents know their children need and don't need for them to reach their potential. These are our children. Public education is a service provided by the government and funded through taxpayer dollars. Individuals in this community have voted you as members to serve on this governing board and to act as a liaison between the school and the community. It seems we have lost sight of these fundamental and important points. Many parents, myself included, have brought concerns, made requests, filed complaints, only to be ignored, mocked, gossiped about, quoted out of context, and denied the ability to actually be the first teacher and decision maker for our children. That's why we are raising our voices, and I guarantee they won't be lost, because all includes our children too.
Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Ms. Kelly Garst.
I didn't know if this was an agenda item.
It is an agenda item because we'll be taking a hiring decision later on in the agenda.
Oh, go for it.
My name is Kelly Garst, and I have one student that graduated from Perrysburg High School 2 years ago, and I have a girl someone that's going to be a senior, and I have someone that's going to be a freshman. And I am just wanting to voice my support for the majorette coach or advisor and say that I believe that my daughter in her senior year needs her expertise to guide her in the college process. And I firmly believe that having known this person for over 10 years, that she would never do anything to harm any of the children in her care. So I guess I'm just voicing my support. I thought this was kind of not an agenda item, so I guess I'm confused, but I don't know my parliamentary pro either, so thank you.
You did fine.
Thank you very much for your comments. And our final speaker for this session, also regarding majorette, Mr. Drew Griffith. I'm sorry? Okay. With that, that ends this first public participation session. We'll do another one on non-agenda items at the end of the meeting. So with that, that moves us to the superintendent's report. Mr. Hostler? We're going to talk about, what are we going to talk about? Public opinion survey.
Yep, thank you. So as we prepare to return to school, this is a time where we annually update the board and community regarding our annual stakeholder survey. And we have with us Rachel Zicker, who will go over the results. And I will, as she kind of introduces, I'll pull up the presentation. So.
Well, thank you. This is the 9th time we've conducted this survey. The first time was in 2012. We skipped 1 year early on just to see if we really needed to do it each year to see, how much the points moved, and we decided that there was a lot of movement. The only other year that we didn't do the survey was the first year of the pandemic, 2020. So we started this and have continued to do it because we wanted to make data-driven decisions in areas where there wasn't much data available. For example, initially, communications and facilities were kind of the areas that we were looking at for that. And, we learned things like citizens asked for a printed newsletter, and so we implemented one, so it helped us, kind of make some of those decisions based on data and feedback. So before we discuss the overall results, just wanted to take a quick look at our respondents. We mailed to a random sample of active voters this summer. The active voters list we get from the Board of Elections, and it includes anybody that the Board of Elections considers an active voter. The response rate was down just 2 points from 2021. So respondents were asked if the school district were graded like students in the district, what our overall grade should be. So you can see what the breakdown was there. Looking at the next slide, you can see the changes from 2021. So not a ton of movement. One of the most interesting things that we learned early on, we always kind of had that feeling, but we didn't have any way to count, how many people in the community have that direct connection to the school district. So, 31% of respondents reported that they're a parent or guardian of a current student. So that means 69% of these respondents don't have that direct connection to the school district. So that means that 88% of respondents gave our school district an A or a B, which, when you look at that 69%, not having that direct connection to the school district, that's something of note. It's also just helpful, especially from the communications, standpoint, understanding a little bit more about our population. So there's some demographic information that we've tracked here. So you can see 73% of the respondents have a bachelor's degree or higher. And how long respondents have lived in this school district. This was fascinating to me to just see that breakdown. That's nearly an even breakdown. And if anything, with all the growth and stuff, I was surprised to see that, that less than 5 years is still the smallest cohort, and the over 30 years still being the largest. But still, it's not a huge difference. There's a pretty good spread there. So we asked people how they obtain information about the school district, and the Perrysburg Messenger Journal continues to be Perrysburg School's top tool to reach our community. In fact, they went up a percentage point. They're at 60%, so people could choose from all the options on the survey as many of the options that they used to get news, and that was still right at the top of the list, and strongly at the top of the list. So we asked them where they get information, but we also like to track how they'd prefer to get information. So this is how we asked if they'd prefer an email newsletter and a printed newsletter years ago, before we had actually created those tools. So this kind of helps us determine where folks are and where they'd like to find us. So one thing I found, that not a ton of movement on this, again, year to year. It's kind of nice to see, even when the percentage points don't change that much, it's still really showing us something about kind of where those things are. So it's been fascinating to me that the printed newsletter via U.S. mail actually has continued to move up in the list. So it's actually tied with the email newsletter. Last year, 42% said email newsletter, and the printed newsletter was down at 36%, as most people would probably guess. The social media at 33% was up from 30% last year. So more people are saying, I'd like to find you on social media. But that print newsletter is still very strongly desired from the respondents. We always like to track, how familiar folks are with the Perrysburg Schools Foundation to see how well we're getting information out there about them. We also, just wanted to see how much residents were, aware of the growth, especially knowing that, 69% of them don't have kids coming home telling them about, how full the schools are, to see, where residents are at with their understanding of that. I added a question this year about, what they're most interested in learning. So we found out where they're getting their information today, where they'd like to get their information. Some of that is tools we already are using and, helping us determine how to allocate our resources, but also, within those tools, what types of information do they want to see, in those areas. So So this was interesting and very helpful to help us understand, you know, which types of items to get out there more. The areas perceived as the school district's greatest strength, the academic college prep, this hasn't changed. The greatest challenge is still seen as our growth in size. And then just in summary, the stakeholders, you know, seem to strongly value the district. It's really, you know, I would continue to do this. I find it so helpful, even just in my department, helping to, you know, make sure we're allocating resources wisely. And then when we do allocate them, how are we making the best use of this? Are we answering people's questions? Are we, you know, using the tools that we have? And the full report, along with all the previous reports, are all available on the website. Thanks so much for letting me get nerdy with all this data every year. It's
We know
really
how much
interesting.
you enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's for it.
Any questions?
Well, I found it was interesting that the journal went up in getting information for us, but newspapers and such were at
Overall
the bottom.
media,
And I
yeah.
said, okay, that was interesting. But that newsletter you put out is awesome. That is just really, really good. I like the little tips for parents on there that they were requesting.
Yeah, I tried to test some, you know, and obviously they can always, you know, put some comments in there too, but, you know, it's just important to know what people are looking for, you know, so it's good to put some ideas there, but then also leave it open if I'm, you know, because I'm going to miss something.
Well done.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Hostler, next item, back to school.
All right. Well, thank you, and we wanted to just go over some things relative to coming back to school, so some general information. Also, in the previous presentation, you saw that what folks were interested in hearing more about, certainly financial information, and Treasurer Dreyer will provide at each board meeting, and today provide more information there. But also touching on student success and kind of the positives that go with students and certainly staff. So we wanted to spend a little bit of time, you know, preparing and for the students that are here, kind of easing back into the idea of school, because I know it's a shock to the system. So we're certainly wanting to focus on this upcoming school year, which we're very excited to be entering. So first day of school, we do a rolling start here. And you might recall that this began a number of years ago. And it was a simple conversation where people actually spent more time talking to their car mechanics about what their cars are doing than the opportunity they get to spend talking to their child's teacher about what their children are doing. So one of the things that we started to do here is we began the school year with this rolling start that allows for those opportunities to have that one-to-one conversation with parents and teachers and families. So when you think about the start of the school year, the first full day for kindergarten students is Friday, but between tomorrow and Friday, teachers and individual parents can meet and talk about their child. And that's something that when we did that, we give the board a lot of credit because there wasn't, we'd never done anything like that. There weren't districts around us that were doing that. But it was very well received and something I think parents value. Before, you'd show up at open house, there's all kinds of people around, you're trying to meet and introduce your child to the teacher, get used to the building. And here we also are able to knock out some of that testing that needs to take place early in the school year, where the first few weeks teachers are having to continually pull students out for testing, you know, to place them in the right classes or reading groups or math groups. So this is something that we do. Also, you'll notice that tomorrow, for example, 6, 8, and 9 grades are in session. Those are the first grades of students in that particular building. So again, it gives the students that opportunity to come in with other new students to the district and get that feel of the building without all the students there. The programs that each building offers to help out with that process is really tremendous. And then you can see where it begins. So by Friday, and then certainly on Monday, everybody's back into the routine of school. We do have 2-hour delays scheduled in the calendar, and this came up in one of our committee meetings. But each quarter, as you know, we've had a real shortage with substitute teachers, and it's not unusual in the past for buildings to rely on substitute teachers to do professional development. So if you want to train all the second graders across 4 buildings across the district, how do you get them together to talk about their curriculum, their teaching, their practices? Well, we used to be able to grab subs and use that, and now we know that is something that is very challenging to do. So we've built in just 1 2-hour delay each quarter to help facilitate that so that we're not totally relying on subs, because that is something that has been a real challenge for us. So that's something that we want to highlight. We know that we want to thank our students, families, and employees, faculty, and staff for all that they did to get us to this point at the start of the school year, because it is remarkable that here we are to start a new school year, and all the work and effort that takes to get here. So one is making sure the students are ready to get back into the fold, and that's essential, but also the conditions of the buildings and grounds to welcome those students. We had our operations director here earlier this summer talking about what takes place over the summer to get all the projects done to make the buildings safe, to make sure that the facilities are maintained. And we talked a great deal about that. When people ask staff members who work for the schools, how was your summer break? Not everybody who works in school districts have a summer break, and if you stop by any of the buildings, you see a core group of people that are very dedicated. So we want to say thank you to those folks as well, because we know that it is something that takes a tremendous effort. Our mission statement, ensuring all students achieve their greatest potential, that's really part of our DNA and what we do. And if you poll any of our staff members that have been here for a number of years, and hopefully our new staff members, you'll hear that is something that resonates with them, something that they can recite, and it's something that really drives what we do. So when we talk about it being in our DNA, we mean just that, that it is part of who we are and our identity. One of the things I wanted to mention is, and this came up with some of our new staff, and even over the last year or so, there was a question about, well, some people on staff signed their letters with the word peace. So instead of sincerely or regards or best wishes, why is that? Why does that happen? And so, and you can look at the definition of peace here, and the freedom from disturbance, quiet, tranquility. And at some point, people say, are you making a political statement, when you do that? And the answer is no. So we wanted to go back with the new staff, because in the last probably 5 years, we have hired a number of new staff that are new to the district and new to that culture that we're trying to cultivate. So I told the story this morning, and how this whole peace signature came about is actually a friend that I had. Pete McHugh is an attorney, graduated a couple years ahead of me in high school. His cousin was one of my best friends. And Pete was a well-liked, respected attorney in Northwest Ohio. And he's a defense attorney, and you can imagine being a defense attorney, oftentimes you have to write emails and letters that aren't always pleasant. And one of the things that Pete always did is he signed all of his letters peace. And so the year that he passed away in 2017, and there's a picture of Pete and their daughters, and so one of the things that we talked about opening day in 2017 was kind of a 30-day challenge of signing all of your emails, with the closing piece, in really in honor of that sentiment of somebody who did that in a very challenging situation. So at that time, many of Pete's friends from around Northwest Ohio really supported doing that, and they did a fundraiser, and they had his signature of how he signed peace. And that's something that we did here in Perrysburg. So for us, one of the things that we're looking to do is extending that challenge, because we've had so many people that have come into the district since 2017 who wonder, why do they do this? And even families have asked that question, some sincerely. And so what this is about for us is that challenge, because when you are sending an email, and maybe it's not a nice email, and maybe your tone isn't quite what it should be, when you get to the bottom of that email and you see the word peace, I can tell you that you have to go back up sometimes and rewrite portions of that email because it's very challenging to get to that closing and close that way. So that's something that, again, this morning we talked about it with the staff, this challenge of, where did it come from? And I think it really captures what we try to do. And certainly Pete and his family certainly is a huge loss for them. But also I think that what people grabbed onto about his life and how he chose to live and communicate with others and treat others is something I think was worthwhile to kind of pause for a moment to do that. So the whole peace thing, when you see people come and send emails and that's on the bottom, I think it's important to know where that challenge came from. And certainly they're not obligated to do it. It's something that everybody has to come to, and that's fine. So getting into the financials to just highlight a few big picture items. I know Randy goes into great detail. But in Ohio, the Ohio Department of Education calculates the expenditures of every school district in Ohio. And they compile that and other important data in a report called the CUP report, C-U-P-P, and you can go out and find it, and you can look at different years. And so one of the things that we want to highlight is going back to 2017 to where we are today, the amount that Perrysburg spends to educate a student is far less each year than what the average cost is in the state of Ohio. So looking at this snapshot, just going back the last 5 years, there were 3 consecutive years where our cost per pupil actually fell from year to year, while the state increased from year to year. And folks may say, well, what is the importance of that? So today, or last year, we were $1,339 below the state average per pupil. So if for a moment, if we as a school district were spending the average amount of all the 609 school districts, if we spent what the average school district is in Ohio and what they spend, we would be spending $7.6 million more. Or another way to look at it is we're spending $7.6 million less than the average school district would spend to educate our students. And we're going to talk a little bit about the results that we get in that circumstance. But a few weeks ago, and how does this happen? And this is just an example from the summer. But when our director of operations came and talked about all the projects that were happening across the district, he provided a very detailed, this is what we budgeted, and here's what it actually costs us to complete those projects. And when you added up the cost and what was budgeted for those, we saved over $95,000. So that is just one example of how we look at what we do and how we do it to make sure that we are looking at that cost, because you don't get to, certainly you don't get to this place without thinking about how much you're spending on projects and everything that we do, from staffing to programming to other areas. So we're very proud of this. It's a great value that we are able to provide the community. And it's something that you can measure and look at in terms of what we are spending per pupil based on an independent look, that can compare to other districts. This is a graph that I know the board is familiar with. It does examine the growth here in the district from year to year. So from September enrollments, from September enrollments. And you can see that going back to 1999, where we had just under 4,400 students, to we're now approaching last year 5,600 students you can see that steady climb. During COVID, there was a little bit of a blip, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide, where that occurred. But we're again beginning to see that steep acceleration here. How growth happens, and when you think about it, it doesn't happen where there is just one large incoming class and all the growth is isolated to one grade level. And this is one of my favorite slides because it is very haunting, frankly. But take a look at 2016 and 17. That year, we had 312 kindergartners, the smallest that we've had since 2014 class. Those students last year were in the 5th grade. That 312 has turned into 394 students. Looking more closely in 2018 with one of our larger classes, 394 in the history of Perrysburg. Last year, that class was in 3rd grade. That has swelled up to 442 students. So when you think about that snowball that starts out on the hill or the mountain and it starts to roll and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, that's how growth happens in our district. It's every grade level. It's not just one grade level. And you can see how those classes just continue to increase. We'll update this in September, and these classes will go from where they are now to the next grade level. So we'll see what one more year did to these numbers. Also, it's important to note that as of last week, we had 392 kindergartners registered in Perrysburg schools. I know that number will go up because we're still screening kindergartners, and I believe this week, at least until Friday, I believe that appointments for enrolling new students is still full. So we're still registering new students even as school begins. So we're looking at possibly the largest kindergarten class that we've seen in the history of Perrysburg beginning this year. So the idea that, that somehow that Perrysburg is losing students or that narrative, the reality is that we're gaining students, and it's happening at multiple grade levels, but this is one way that we track students as they're coming in and then monitoring what happens after they're here. And you remember the city came out, did a presentation about their land use. And they had projections in terms of enrollment in the city, and they had moderate and low. And it's not just Perrysburg saying that growth is happening, Perrysburg schools, but it's also the local governments that are looking at the land and what's happening and how things are being zoned, and properties and large tracts of property that are being purchased with the idea that things are going to be converted into homes. The good news is we began last year with the board's direction talking about what is our next step. What should the district do to respond? We have 3 groups right now that have formed that have been meeting for several months, going back to last winter. And we've been meeting through the summer, looking at what is the response to growth in general. There's another group that's meeting focusing on specific areas within the buildings that are unique spaces, from special education to fine and performing arts, to athletics, to STEM, to science labs. They're focusing in on just those particular areas. And then we have a 3rd committee that's been meeting under our treasurer's leadership to talk about, well, what will this cost as a project to do what they're recommending when they get there? And secondly, what will it cost us to operate that? Because it's one thing to have a great plan that the community supports. It's another thing to have an actual plan to fund and to fund the operations of that. So when we come back to the board, not only will it be a recommendation for a plan from this community group, but it will also address very unique space that's important in the district. And it will also come with what is a recommendation as to how we can fund that project, and also the operational considerations and what savings can come with that. So we'll be updating this in September as we get into that. Perrysburg High School, Junior High, and Hall Prairie each last year earned the Ohio Department of Education's Purple Star designation. And this is to recognize schools' commitments to serving military families. And you'd be surprised in Northwest Ohio the number of families that have members who are actively serving in the military. And the commitment, we know that those that serve, it is a tremendous commitment to go overseas, to be deployed, to always be on call. And we're certainly grateful for those that do that. But also through this process, I think our staff has really become even more respectful of the impact that this has on the families that are attached to those military individuals who are serving. You know how difficult it is to plan to take your children on a vacation, or if one of your family members goes away for a business trip or out of town, how am I going to get children from point A to point B? Who's going to pick them up for practice? How am I going to get to the store? All of those kinds of things. Well, military families have to deal with that question with a family member who leaves for 4 or 5 or 6 months at a time. It is significant, and oftentimes those families are new to a community because of where they've been stationed or deployed, and they don't know and they don't have access to resource. So I'm very proud of our staff, the principals, the teachers, the support staff, the counselors who put together a plan and make it known that we are here to serve the entire families and those individuals. So we're very proud of that. STEAM and STEM designation at HPI. HPI was one of the first STEM schools designated in Northwest Ohio. We've since added another letter to that, which is STEAM. So it's science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And those people that work in that building have had a tremendous impact, not only on our curriculum and what we do, but also across the state, because there is not a month that goes by we don't have visitors who are either coming to look at the facility, which was designed by our teachers with teaching in mind, and to look at what is actually being taught. So we're very proud of that, and we have award-winning programs, award-winning teachers, and award-winning students that are all there. In 2018, we pulled together community members and business leaders to talk about what are the qualities that we're looking for in Perrysburg graduates. So when they graduate from Perrysburg High School, what are those kinds of things that we're looking for? And this is actually the list that they came up with. And it's an important list for us, and we're going to be spending more and more time in terms of how do we do this? It doesn't happen by accident. So for example, if you look at empathetic citizens, how do we prepare graduates who are going to be empathetic citizens? Because we've heard from the business community that says we want individuals that are going to work on our team that can get along with individuals, who can serve a variety of our clients, work in a variety of settings. And that's how we arrived at this empathetic citizens. But what do we do as teachers, as staff members, to make sure that we're giving students the opportunity to learn and understand others' perspectives and experiences, to be able to contribute to local businesses and to their own quality of life? So much of the things that we're doing today is coming back to this process and what folks have identified and what they want from our graduates. So we want to talk a little bit about the academic performance. We know that going into COVID, we had multiple years in a row where we saw gains increasing across the board, whether it's the performance index scores or individual content area scores. And then COVID obviously set the world back. And we shared with the board what our plan was a year ago in terms of how we were going to address making up for these gains. And so I wanted to share a little bit about the work that's taken place in the classrooms. And we're talking about paraprofessionals that are helping teachers and counselors and principals. It's a team effort to get to this place. But we have found in this last year is the first year of implementing this plan coming out of COVID, that we have had our best performances ever in Algebra 1, English Language Arts 2, Geometry, and Biology. So that's important, that it shows that not only is the plan working in terms of closing those gaps, and you've heard that term quite a bit in the last year, closing those gaps, but now by doing this and focusing on the instructional practices and doing what's right for students, we've seen gains that have even exceeded pre-COVID levels. So one of the things, just to share here, and you can look at it, so it's a little hard to read on the screen, but going back to 2017 and then looking at where we are last year, you can begin to see, and then the spring of 2021, you'll notice there wasn't any testing in the spring of 2020 because no one was allowed to come to school. So you can see here where, we have significantly closed the gap and continue to strive to do just that. There are areas that we still have work to do, but you can see, that we are starting to rebound, and in some cases even surpassing and approaching where we were at pre-COVID levels. And that is an incredible salute to our teachers who really dug in, and the teams that we put together in teaching and learning to support the work of what's taking place in the classroom. This next slide gets back into kind of a deeper dive with the overall scores in English language arts, math, and just as an example, and those are two areas in curriculum we're really focusing this upcoming year. But you can see that coming from 2019 pre-COVID to 2021, we saw that drop. So that's the gaps that we've been talking about and coming up with a plan to address. And then in 2022, you can see the numbers starting to rebound and starting to fall in line to almost where we left off. So we're going to confirm these numbers with the state, but the preliminary results are very, very good. But we saw, drops from, and you know this because we've presented on this, but in 2019 to 2020 with 2021 there, in that period of time, you saw gaps of -5 points, -9 points, -7 points. We're now seeing gains of 3 points, of 5 points, and 5.5 points. So we're starting to see that, and that momentum that we started last year in identifying and using the data to really do that targeted intervention, we're beginning to see the results of that. I stole this from Randy, and I hope he doesn't get too upset, but you've heard of College Credit Plus. College Credit Plus is a program that is available to Ohio students, where Ohio students can earn college credit as high school students. It even applies to junior high students who are eligible. And so we have a number of teachers that are teaching College Credit Plus courses in Perrysburg High School. So students who are enrolled in many of these courses never leave Perrysburg High School to take a college course, and they're taught by our teachers. Now, to do that, we have those teachers are also under the control of local universities, and we talked a few months ago about enrollment and how we count students, if you recall. So one of the challenges with this is if a student is enrolled, never leaves Perrysburg schools, is taught by Perrysburg teachers the entire time, but that 1 or 2 classes are actually in a College Credit Plus course. For those 2 classes that student's enrolled in, they're not counted as Perrysburg students. They're counted as something less. But at any rate, over 1,792 college credits were awarded to Perrysburg High School students last year. That is the equivalent of 14 bachelor's degrees. And when you go to the College Credit Plus website, it says in bold letters, free. Well, in Ohio, there's nothing free. And actually what pays for it is our local taxpayers with this program. So the cost of all of those credit hours actually is billed to Perrysburg, and we transfer money for that purpose, or money's withheld in the formula. But what last year's deduction was $176,000. So that is something that I think is important to note, but certainly achievement on many levels. There's another path that parents and families often take with their students to get that college credit, and that's sometimes our advanced placement classes. So advanced placement courses are taught by Perrysburg teachers. They are teachers that go through special training in each content area. And then at the end of that year, our students take AP tests, and then they get the results. Students that get a score of a 3 or above, up to 5, are awarded college credit. And so you can see here going back to 2018, where we had 200 students that took an AP test. Actually, of those 200 students, there were 353 tests given. You can see where we are today. We're now last year, 276 students took 512 tests. So we have more students than ever taking AP courses. We have more tests being taken by Perrysburg students more than ever. And you can see that we are now scoring on average higher than we've ever scored before. And that's remarkable. And I like to think of it this way, that we're talking about some high school things right now, and the high school gets the benefit, and I mean this respectfully, but they get the benefit because they're like the tip of that iceberg. That's what people can see because of these kinds of programs. What they don't get to see is all the work that goes from preschool all the way up to get those students in this position in their senior year or junior year. So one of the things that happened at an earlier board meeting is we recognized Perrysburg High School at the end of the school year, national merit finalists and semifinalists. So that is something that happened, and there was a lot of people at that meeting. And I just wanted to kind of pull back a little bit and have you take a look at what that really means and how big of a deal it is. So in Northwest Ohio, this is a list of the semifinalists and finalists for the National Merit Program. And you can see here that Perrysburg last year, and we brought them to the board meeting, and there were 6. And we were able to acknowledge and recognize them. And these are the other schools in Northwest Ohio. So if you don't see a school's name, it's not because we left them off, it's because they didn't have any. And you can see that Perrysburg's, Sylvania, Southview are tied. Maumee Valley Country Day is the next with 5. And I like the idea of competition, and someone asked the question about how do we compete with private schools, and you can kind of see here. But I wanted to kind of point this out, that when you take a look at the number of National Merit Finalists, semifinalists at these schools, and you combine them, it's half of what we did this past year, which is incredible. And the last 2 years, the class of 2021 and 2022 combined received over $34 million in scholarship offers. So not only is it not us recognizing our students and what things they do to accomplish, the teachers, and focusing on the right things academically, but we also see by these kind of statistics that it's not just us that are recognizing this, but it is also universities across Ohio that are saying we want Perrysburg students to come to our campuses. This past summer, we've spent $750,000 in technology from STEM labs, which continues to be a point of emphasis. We've upgraded the Perrysburg High School labs that are there, invested heavily in life science, and we'd love to show you some of the neat things that we've done there, where that high school students will be able to replicate a cadaver on a table with one of the instruments that we were able to purchase, 3-dimensional. So it's incredible the kind of technology that's available to our students. And we've expanded the one-to-one devices now reaches down from grades 3 to 12, with 3rd grade and 4th grade not taking devices home, but having access to a device in the classroom. And this is important on many levels. One, that's where students are learning, and that's where businesses and colleges want students to be. But also when we talk about state tests, that's where they're being administered in that environment. So if we don't have students that are prepared and familiar with laptops and how to operate, it puts students at a disadvantage when it comes that time. Recruiting and hiring new employees. So we had over 36 new teachers that were hired. We had a number of retirees that left. We have some that were hiring new positions, which is for growth. And this has been something that takes a tremendous amount of effort. You've seen in the papers about the shortage of teachers that is starting to escalate across the country. And Perrysburg has always been, we talk about it being a destination district for students and families to be here. But for professional educators, it also is a destination district where people want to be. So we've always benefited from people who start somewhere else, do a few years, get some experience, and then come to Perrysburg. And this year, we've seen a decrease in that because those teachers aren't coming, because they're not in those other districts, because they can't find teachers. And it becomes this chain reaction. We had a high school science opening at Perrysburg High School. We had 4 applicants for that position. It's an incredible concern for us. Colleagues that I work with closely in urban districts and rural districts are starting the year with either long-term subs or holes in their schedules for students because they can't physically get someone to come to those districts to teach. Since 3 years ago to today, there are over 500,000 fewer teachers than there were. In 3 years, that's the number that have decreased. And we saw teachers resign to go do other things. So this year is something that we really want to focus on in terms of how can we create a climate that supports educators and supports the work that they do. In transportation, Friday, and the state has changed some of the regulations to become a teacher. So if you have a bachelor's degree, for example, you can get a license even though you don't have a bachelor's degree in education or a teaching certificate. We had a bus driver who had a bachelor's degree who resigned on Friday to become a teacher on Monday. The bad news is that the beginning of this year, we're down, including the subs that we rely on for transportation, about 17 bus drivers. So we have enough to begin the routes that we need to get kids to and from school. But a lot, we're going to be back to where there becomes a driver that is out, a driver that leaves. It's going to be more and more difficult to fill that position. It takes weeks, if not months, to go from, hey, I'd like to be a bus driver, to actually getting your license, which is a good thing because they're traveling with precious cargo, and it's important that they're trained. But the pipeline, we continue to fill it, and we're doing our very best with that across the board in the industry, whether it's trucking firms or school buses. The CDLs are very hard to come by. So one of the things that we're going to be sharing with the community, we've had the staff to be able to do this, where it is something that we have alternative transportation requests. So, and what we've done and what we've done up to this point is we've allowed families. And let's say you have a situation where you have parents who are both have custody of a child, and one lives in one home and the other lives in another home. And what we've been able to do is set up a schedule where our buses they'll make sure that student gets on the right bus to go to the first home on Mondays and Wednesdays, and then it goes to the second home on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and maybe on Friday it goes to Grandma and Grandpa's house. And we've been able to make that work because we've had the staff to do that. But one of the things that happens with that situation is when we have to do that, we have to save a seat on that bus for that Monday and Wednesday rider. And right now, with the driver shortage that we have and the increase of students that we have, we can't afford to have an empty seat for 3 days a week, because 2 days a week that student may be, riding that bus. So we've accepted the ones and approved the ones up to this point, but moving forward, folks can still submit them, because if it's the same bus and it's just going to 2 different homes, we can make that work. But if it starts to go into different buses, we won't be able to handle that. So that is something that won't affect a lot of families right away, but it's the kinds of things that we're doing to shore up and put our emphasis on how can we get kids to and from school every single day. Moving forward, Career Day, we know that on April 9th, in April we had 9th and 10th graders get exposed to over 60 different presenters representing a variety of jobs, and we know that the conversation about careers actually began at Hull Prairie in the junior high. And this is something that's really important to us as we've talked to families, the Business Advisory Council here that we have. One of the things that we've begun to dig into is the number of students who graduate, go on to college, who go in undecided or not having a real understanding. So with the federal ESSER dollars that we have, we've talked about this position that we're looking to add, which will begin to set up internships for Perrysburg students with businesses in the summer, on the weekends, perhaps even during the school day, to get students opportunities to shadow, to experience different career options in real time. so that you don't have somebody who wants to go into being an accountant and then go in after so many years and say, I don't know what I was thinking, I can't do this. No offense to accountants, but it's not for everybody. And we don't want our students to find out in the third year that that is something that they really didn't like. So this is something that we're really excited about. This is really a story in these kinds of things. You know, we talk about staff being very important to the lives of our students, in some cases saving students' lives. And we've had alumni who've come back and said, this teacher made a difference in my life. And here's an example of something that happened last year. So we had an exchange student from Ukraine who was here with a family. And in February 24th, Russia invaded the Ukraine. This student's life turned upside down, where her family were displaced, and they weren't sure what was going to happen to her family. And at the end of the year, where does she go as an individual? And this became a real problem, and it's something that our staff, and I won't read this, but we had dedicated educators and counselors. Our advancement office here, Jeff Abke, got involved. And, you know, from talking to Senator Brown's office to figure out a way to get her to be able to stay with her visa as a student, to Mr. Abke connecting with a Perrysburg alum who was a donor that stepped up and said, I'm willing anonymously to pay for her first year of college so she can stay to figure out her life and what has to happen. Other community members continue to raise enough to cover the remainder of her needs. It's what we do, and it's incredible how all of these pieces came together to make this possible. And again, you don't hear a lot about that, and we wanted to kind of pause and highlight that because that's just what we do. But I think it's important to see how, from the development office to the counselors to the community, all of these levels of people who stepped up to make a difference for this young person is incredible. Food service dealt with many supply chain issues last year, and those are going to carry over into this year. But despite that, we were able to offer quality lunches each and every day. We were able to plan and anticipate many of those issues. And frankly, because of the work that we were doing and how things were handled, not only did we see food being delivered, quality lunches, but we saw an increase at each of our buildings over 100, a demand for 100 lunches per day. So at a time when we're having trouble finding all of the things that we need to do to put together lunches, our staff was able to do that, and not only do it in a way that was delicious, nutritional, but also other students said, we want to now start buying lunch. So we're very excited about that. Lila Zazda, who's been in charge of our lunches, you just approved her retirement, which will take place at the end of this calendar year. So we're certainly excited about what she's done and nervous about the future.
Yeah, I think we should revoke that.
One of the things I want to highlight, because this happens all the time, but we had a junior high teacher who said, you know, we've never done a science fair, and we'd like to try it at the junior high. And we didn't know how it was going to work out, and we said, you know, let's try it, because we want to build a culture where people say, let's go ahead and try this, even though it might fail, let's fail forward. And I think that was really important. And so we had a junior high. This is an example of what happens throughout the district. But not only did we have a successful first year, but the recognition that our students received and their ratings was incredible. So we're very grateful for that. We continue to get recognized as being a great place for music education. We also know that the positive behavior intervention and support system across Ohio, each one of our buildings was recognized. We're one of the few districts in Ohio that has been able to have all of their districts receive that award from the state. We also talk about levies, and this is something that when we get those opportunities, but in the last 30 years, there's been 22 levies presented. 15 passed and 7 have failed during that time period, because I think people think that you put a levy on in Perrysburg and it automatically passes. Since 1991 to 2007, 7 levies passed and 7 levies failed. So we've been very fortunate in the recent history, and we share this with our staff and our board because we want to make sure that we're not taking for granted that support. And recently, in 2019, 2020, we've had levies that were passed. Looking forward, we know that the 2019 levy expires, so the board will have an option to replace it, renew it, or let it expire. And in 2025, permanent improvement levy that goes directly to supporting buildings by way of bricks and mortar, not personnel. The board will see that levy expire and have to decide whether it replaces, renewed, or expired. I mentioned that we have committees together looking at growth. We're looking at the growth that's been taking place. And we know in the near future, at some point in time, and we don't know the dates, that there will be a bond issue to handle the growth that we're experiencing, and that community group will make that recommendation. So it's something that we take time to communicate with the folks in Perrysburg so that there aren't any surprises, that it's something that we are working towards and keeping it on their radar. This is one group that does a rating of all Ohio school districts. They use data that is important to them and the companies as a company that they market to. But it's always interesting to take a look at where Perrysburg lands on this. Out of the 608 districts reported in these categories, ranging from safety to places to teach as an educator, to teachers, to just overall district and then athletics, you can see that we're really in rare air when you talk about the 609 school districts across the state of Ohio, that in most of these, we're in the top 40, in the top 25, in the top 10 in certain categories. It's remarkable that we do this. You might have seen this summer, and you can see here Ohio Magazine Best Hometown that will be published in November 1st. And you can see yet again that in the 6 categories, education, entertainment, business environment, culture, heritage, community spirit, based on those indicators, they select different communities, and Perrysburg was picked. And when you think about, obviously, education, and that's what we do, but you talk about community spirit, and you drive downtown, and you see this is jacket country, and every student that comes into this city, our communities, the townships that wears that black and gold, they're yellow jackets. And that spirit is contagious across our community. So again, we're very attentive to these kinds of things and understand that we play a major role in making Perrysburg such a desirable area. And then finally, 2035. This can be a troubling number because the kindergartners that are starting today will be graduating in 2035. And I know some of us who see that number know that we might not be here to see them graduate. But the reality is everything we do, all the things that we've talked about, the things that we've put in place have focused on the experience that these kindergartners who are going to be boarding the buses later this week are going to receive. And I think we do an outstanding job in getting those students and taking them to any place they want to go. Academically, performing in fine arts, athletically, just being a desirable and highly functioning individual in our community and beyond. So with that, we wish everybody a great year. And this was the red, white, and blue, the patriotic game theme that they had in Steinecker, and we're looking forward to having those games and themes back. So kind of a quick overview, maybe not that quick, but overview of kind of back to school message. And as Rachel pointed out, folks want to hear about our students and what we're doing for them. So thanks.
Nicely done.
Yeah, thank you. If not quick, it was certainly thorough. And we had a chance to spend the morning with the teachers on opening day, and that was a great experience to see all the enthusiasm that these teachers are bringing to the school year. So thank you, Tom.
Well, it's also great to get the message out there. This type of message is fantastic. It's needed to get out there, and that's what we're all about for the schools.
Thank you. I thought it was great. I thought it was great.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Now it's on to the treasurer's report.
Mr. Bennington, I think I'm going to stay here and keep things moving and not make my normal trip up to the lectern. Plus, Mr. Hostler stole half of my thunder anyway, but that's okay. I will tell you, it is a joy to have a superintendent who gets the financial stuff. May not like it, but he's truly a partner in the issues we talk about, and he gets it, and I appreciate that. Sometimes treasurers feel a little bit alone, and certainly I don't, and I do appreciate that. So, I don't know if Tom, I don't think I can switch it from here, unless I'm not on. I'm not on. Okay, so Tom's already hit on these things, but I just wanted to mention that, return on investment. And when I came on board here, this is my 10th board meeting, regular board meeting, something like that. I can't believe it's been fast approaching a year. But I said then that my job is not just to count beans, but to support the educational efforts of the district. And so what's our return on investment? You've already seen these numbers. I will add on the College Credit Plus, that number is what we are directly, as Tom mentioned, directly paying to the colleges and universities that accredit the classes. It doesn't include the cost for staff and books and facilities. So it's a great deal for our families and our students to be able to generate those credits here. So to me, it's a capstone for the district. Now to get into more mundane stuff. So we're 1 month into the fiscal year, and July can be a hit or miss month based on timing of things. On the revenue side, we didn't get our final settlement until last week, so we're a little bit behind on the revenue side. And it's not really an issue, it's just the timing of getting that check from the county. But the highlight I'll point out is on income tax. That is our setting. Income tax for this quarter was 16% higher than it was last year. So for me, that's an economic measurement that the economy, at least in terms of wages and income, continue to be strong. On the tax side, there's really not much conclusion to make until till the end of this month when we enter our final settlement. You'll notice on all other revenue that you'll see a significant difference between last year and this year. That is due to a one-time refund of expenses from a previous year. We got an unexpected check that said, hey, have some money back, which we gladly accepted from previous year's expenses. And for that amount of money, for less than 0.5% of our total revenue, it's not worth going back and redoing the books just for that amount. So we just recognize it in the year that is. But we recognize it's a one-off. On the expenses side, where obviously that's kind of where the major concerns are, and they just are. From a financial standpoint, we're projecting 10% increase in expenses year over year, while revenue is growing about 3%. And obviously that's a concern. We're still good, and we're working on dealing with that little bit of a deficit we're forecasting. But it's what we have to address, and that's where growth is coming in. You'll notice on the salaries, we're at 7.5% of forecast. Last year this time we were 7. We are still transitioning from 26 pays to 24. Once we get through September, we'll have a full year, and then we'll be month to month will be equivalent year to year. And everything else is, benefits are a little bit higher. Again, we had just a little bit of a posting error. I won't call it an error. We posted things a little too soon. We thought about going back and just doing a correcting entry, but I'd look at it it's not real money. It's just, it was written in the checkbook before it went out, before August 1st. So what caused that has been addressed. Just someone hitting a button. The nice thing about technology, it makes it efficient, but sometimes you hit the wrong button. And as long as the money's still in the bank, I'm okay. So this is our cash flow. We only have 1 point on here. You can't quite see it. We're a little bit less at this point, but that's just because of, again, timing of the tax settlement. We'll be above that yellow line, through most of this year. Investments. This is where we're making some of our biggest changes in terms of the fiscal office. You'll notice Huntington must have a negative, and that's because we have chosen to pay more fees rather than leave our money sitting in Huntington doing nothing. So we're taking money out, it's costing us a little bit more in fees, but we're getting earnings elsewhere. And you can see like Star, Ohio, our July earnings, and that was over $31,000. A year ago at this point, we were generating about $2,000 in earnings. Now, it's not all great wisdom on my part. The interest rates, what the Fed does, that helps our investments. So as long as we're not borrowing, we like to see the interest rates going up, but obviously it cools the economy, all those things. But increases in Fed rates directly positively impacts our earnings. It's just a one-to-one based on our investments. And our commercial paper, again, we're showing a negative, but that's just because we haven't booked unrealized earnings yet. We have about $10,000 in unrealized earnings. We will, when they're sold, we'll realize those earnings. It's just more of, at this point, in accounting. So just a couple things. Again, our year-to-year revenue is down, but that's just mainly due to the timing of property settlement. Our income tax is up over $500,000 from last year at this time, and we had a one-time revenue boost. Total expenses are up. Again, part of that is timing, and we're still working on transitioning on the pay side. A couple things to follow up on. We did a banking RFP. We've decided to stay with Huntington. We've got a plan to reduce our fees with them, and we've added some investment accounts to maximize return, and we're also updating our security practices with Huntington. We had good security practice in place. We're taking them to the next level. So we're happy. I'll say all the banks that we've dealt with offer similar services, and it was just not enough of a benefit to switch from Huntington to someone else at this point. A couple of miscellaneous items. In your in board docs, there's a document there that shows our transaction report with Red Tree. That's our commercial paper investments. Annually, by Ohio Revised Code, I need to present that to you. It just shows us what we bought and sold. That's all, and you can go in and look at the kind of investments that we have. We only been in a couple months, so there's not a whole lot of activity. Next year, it'll be a little more complicated. You'll also, I provided a copy of our finance manual, and this is an effort from Tina Biambi in my office to provide a document for the building secretaries and administrators on key financial procedures and where to get documents and links, and I think it's been very well received. I put a copy in there. It's really too lengthy to print out. It's intended to be an electronic document, but it's there. Feel free to use it, and I think we may use it as a model for some other documents we're going to produce for handbooks and things. That is my fast and dirty report this month. Next month, they'll get meatier as we go along. And as we said, we start getting into enrollment numbers in October. We start getting some more specific where we are in the year. But we're off to a good start. We're excited to have the kids coming back, and the staff was all pretty excited today. I think they have as much energy as the students do, at least for a day or two. So, any questions?
Okay, you also have agenda items 5.2 and 5.3 and 5.4. Anything you want to highlight from those?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. The item 5.3 is a little bit it's not unusual. Just that you can see our initial allocation from federal and state grants. That resolution authorized me to create the funds and accept those monies. And item 5.4 is a little bit different. Over the next couple months, you're going to see more of these. One of my goals this year is clean up some of our accounts. A lot of our buildings have multiple accounts that are not necessary to have that many funds. So we're going to consolidate things, make it easier on the building principals, and but also allow me and us to account and attract things. So in this case, Toth was the first one that would go on. They had a couple of essentially accounts that were, there's money sitting in them, but they weren't active. And we need to track that. So we're gonna close those accounts and move those monies into, we call it Toth General Fund. That's the principal's building fund, an 018 fund, and there'll be line items in there. So in this case, Ms. Molina can utilize those numbers. Having them sit in a fund and not being spent doesn't benefit the students at all. So we're trying to make sure we clean these things up. Whether it's inactive money, it's being used to support students and staff.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Drewer. With that, I'm looking for a motion to approve agenda items 5.2 to 5.4.
So moved.
Ms. Larimer?
Second.
Ms. Eubank, and roll call, please.
Ms. Larimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Eubank,
Yes.
Dr. Reffert,
Yes.
Mr. Pullman.
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. Next on the agenda, board committee reports. Personnel committee, I believe, met this morning, or this afternoon,
This
right
afternoon.
before this meeting. Anything to note from that meeting?
Not really any addition than, Mr. Hostler stealing our thunder again, but that's okay. The big thing was the bus drivers. That's an issue, obviously, across the country. So right now, as they said, fully staffed would be additional 17, and we can handle what we have right now, but God forbid anything serious happen, or somebody resign, it's gonna be tighter than it is now.
Thank you. Operations committee.
Let me continue with operations with transportation. Again, if you look at the notes, they're all there for us, but the high school will be delayed a few of the routes because of the transportation issues, but that's all taken care of with supervision in the cafeteria and so forth. Also, some pickup routes will be changed, so it may not pick you up in front of your door. You might have to walk a block or half a block to be picked up, so that's been changed too. I point that out because it's a change and that could cause some concerns. Other than that,
And they said high school might be delayed certain routes because of where they pick up for elementary. So high school could be delayed, certain routes.
if you haven't had a chance, I know Mr. Hostler had on the presentation also, but take a look at the maintenance this summer and all the work that was taking place again, thanks to the PI. But we continue to take care of the buildings, and they could use a lot more work, but we do a good job keeping them up to speed to house our students. But a lot of things took place this summer again.
And our meeting was held in the second floor,
Oh.
of the Hutchinson Center, which was very nice. I'd never been upstairs, so that was great to see the work that's been done there.
You beat me up there. I've yet
Beautiful-
to see that.
Yeah, beautiful space.
Finance committee, I believe Mr. Drewer pretty much covered what we'd covered in that meeting last Friday. Teaching and learning?
We talked about, that was held at the beginning of August. We talked about a top 25 successes and a review of 21, 22, and the top 25 of what we're going to roll into 22, 23 with. Talked a lot about the scores and our achievement, pre-COVID.
Closing the gap.
And now.
Yeah, closing the gap, yeah.
Pupil services?
Can I bring them back to that? If you look at those top 25 things that are taking place, it's just, again, it's amazing. If you could put that up, Mr. Hostler, on the screen, the T&L, it just impresses to me that the things that are taking place in your committee meetings.
It's up.
Right, there's just a lot going on behind the scenes, and it's just a really interesting how Mr. Schwartzmiller, shares what's going on across the district with the DLT, our district leadership teams, building level, TBTs, and just the scores and how the, OTES 2.0 and the new report card, and we don't know when, OD is going to release that and what it's actually going to look like. So, they release it whenever they want to. Yeah, another ODE mystery. It'll roll out hopefully September, maybe October, whenever they decide they want to share the school districts across the states, their reports. But it's just been, we've been very focused on what we've been talking about, so it's been really good highlights.
Okay, thank you. Communications committee?
Well, you got a big chunk of it with the public opinion survey. But Rachel created a welcome back to school guide, which we went through, and this is the printed version. Of course, it's actually easier to read online because it's full of hyperlinks that will take you to wherever you need to go. So the mapping out of it was excellent. And of course, for the amount of work that went into it, there's like, well, gee, I wish we could have done this way. So it's already being revamped and rethought out. But this was a really great one-stop shop for not only new families or new staff, but old families to refer to as well, and bounce around with those types of things. And Mr. Hostler explained the things about the calendar, and I would encourage people that if they're in, like if you're in high school, to go to the high school section of our website and see their calendar, so that you're updated on what your school's calendar is doing and the special events that they have, which is in more detail than the generalized calendar that we approve. So it was a good meeting. Always is.
Did I miss any committees?
Policy, or not policy, pupil services.
Pupil services, yes.
In pupil services, we did, that one's always pretty heavy. Justin Foltz is the new assistant with Andrea, and he came up with a way to try, this is in your notes, but he came up with a way to make pupil services kind of make sense to everybody. Like, it was kind of like the thing that we do with it, who are you and what do you do in 5 minutes? This is his version of that for pupil services. So if you've ever wondered about it, take a look at that little chart that he made, because that's pretty cool. Andrea also made a chart about the increase in our students with disabilities in our school compared to where the state level is. So it's been increasing, and there was a pretty big jump in 2021-22. And if you look at that chart, I want you to be aware that, like, for 21-22, that's the information that was collected in 2020-21. So it's like a year back. So they're kind of at this point explaining that jump between 9.95 and 11.2 is probably due to the shutdown, to that catching up, and the additional help that's needed at that particular point. So that's the bird's eye view of what we did in pupil services.
Okay, going to take a liberty on the agenda here. I've been asked if we can take a break. So if we're in favor of that, we will take a break for 10 minutes.
Okay.
Gavel back in at 7:05.
All right.
Thank you.
Is the consent agenda. So we are voting on item 7.1 through 8:12. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda? Mr. Pullman?
Second.
Dr. Reffert? And roll call, please.
Mr. Pullman.
Yes.
Dr. Reffert.
Yes.
Mrs. Eubank.
Yes.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. Consent agenda items pass. So that moves us to board discussion. Is there any items that the board would like to raise at this time? Okay. Seeing none, we will go into our second opportunity for public participation. Similar to the first session, this section will be limited to 15 minutes unless there's board action. That is in total time, 3 minutes per speaker. When I recognize you, please come forward, state your name, your address, and your association with the school district. If you have any materials to hand out, please hand them to an administrator in the back, and they'll make sure that they get to us. I'll also note that we will not be responding to comments at this time. Mr. Hostler or myself may or may not respond in the future. And again, Just want to share the reminder that, I'll just read it again, the district does not allow individuals during public comment portions of the meeting to either name a student or refer a student in such a way that a student can be personally identified. Under the Family Educational Right to Privacy Act, the board must protect all students' privacy, and we appreciate your cooperation. So with that, our first speaker for the second session, just in order here, Mr. Michael Metzger, please come to the podium. State your name, address, affiliation with the district, and you have 3 minutes once you begin.
Good evening. My name is Michael Metzger. I live on Mill Road. My son is a graduate of Perrysburg High School. He's now in the U.S. Air Force. I have one question, which I know you cannot answer, but then I have a comment. Who will be watching these two students in the bathrooms, in the hallways, in the libraries? Who will be monitoring them, and who is paying for this? I hope we aren't. Here's my comment. Whenever a school levy is on the ballot, we are told if it doesn't pass, children will suffer. Due to the school board's actions or inactions, children will start suffering tomorrow. 2 students will be allowed to walk the classrooms without supervision, so it seems to us. We have not been told. No one has said what's going to take place. They will be forced to interact, the students will be forced to interact with 2 sexual predators. Let me say that again, 2 sexual predators. These 2 predators will be allowed carte blanche to roam freely to after-school activities as if nothing ever happened. Would you allow any one of us to associate with these kids? Would you allow any of them to go into a basement? Knowing that, hey, maybe a sexual assault's gonna happen. We don't know. We now know it just wasn't a one-time occurrence. We know this happened a few times. I implore the school board and the administration to not allow them to participate in extracurricular activities. If something, God forbid, happens, will you once again wash your hands of the situation and allow lawyers and money to influence your indecisive actions? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Metzger. So moving through so that we can keep it under 15 minutes, Keegan Short.
Hello, my name is Keegan Short. I live on Mandel Road. I wanted to speak up today on behalf of all my friends, teammates, and classmates who have expressed their thoughts, feelings, and frustrations over the last few weeks since the perpetrators had their hearing and pled guilty to sexual felonies. On August 1st, so many of us were excited to show up to our first football practice. We know that playing football and participating in other extracurricular activities is a privilege we have earned by following the code of conduct, getting good grades, and following the rules. Imagine our horror when these guys showed up to the first day of football practice. We hadn't seen them since they were arrested in March, and without warning, we were suddenly being forced to be their teammates, and later this week we will have to be their classmates. The following statements are quotes from other PJHS students, both boys and girls. I hope they have to sit in the front of the bus because the back of those seats are so high that the bus driver would not be able to see it if they are messing around. They also shouldn't be allowed to use any of the bathrooms. Make them use the ones in the nurse's office. If these boys are not punished, we are only setting the tone that their behavior is acceptable, and more kids will do it and get away with it and the victim list will continue to grow and grow. It's not fair that they still get to do what everyone else is doing. Nobody else did what they did, but they still get to come to school and play football like normal, like nothing happened. We've earned the privilege of playing football by following the rules. Those kids should lose that privilege. I'm afraid to use the bathroom at school because they could be in there watching me. It makes me worried to be a smaller guy in the locker room. They always talk to each other, and you never know what they are saying or planning. I don't feel safe around them at school knowing what happened. I don't want that happening to me. It's like they have no remorse. They are just throwing this in all of our faces. This isn't fair to the boys they hurt. Why should they have to see them every day? I am worried they will do it again. They aren't even getting in trouble. My parents would be so embarrassed and ground me forever. Instead of playing football, they'd make me do community service instead. I want to feel proud to be a Perrysburg Yellow Jacket, and I don't know if I do right now. School should be a safe place for kids. School should be a safe place, and kids shouldn't have to go to school and feel uncomfortable around their classmates. As a football teammate, we should be able to talk to each other. But when you are uncomfortable being around your teammates, it's hard to be a good teammate. They don't represent being a Yellow Jacket in a good way. I don't like them. I like the victims, and I feel like a traitor even being on a team with them. They're whack. No one likes them. I can't stand that we are talking about them so much. I'm constantly catching myself looking at them to make sure they aren't looking at me or someone who can't defend themselves. I feel really confused at how the boys are coming back to school and
Mr. Short, with all due respect, that's 3 minutes. If you could wrap it up or come to a conclusion. Thank you.
We just want to know how we, the teammates and classmates, feel about your decision to let these admitted sexual offenders back into our school and on our team. What are you going to do to keep us safe? Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Natalie Whipple.
Hi there, my name is Natalie Whipple. I live on Suntrace Drive in Perrysburg, and I have a son going into the junior high, and I'm scared. I am scared to death because of your silence. I have no idea what you're going to do to keep him safe. I'm scared about the bathrooms. I'm scared about the lunchroom. I'm scared about the bus. I don't understand why. I understand that there has to be privacy for these boys, but you need to reassure us that our kids are going to be okay. And there has been none of that on your part. It's almost as if you ask, you're the bad person, and that's not fair. And so I just beg you to be a little bit more transparent about how you're going to keep people safe, how you're going to keep these kids safe. And I agree, football is a privilege, not a right. And the fact that on the agenda is not something about changing the code of conduct, the policies, that's scary. So that's all I have to say. I'm just scared, and I want to know what you're going to do.
Next is Todd. Underwood, thank you. It's okay.
My name is Todd Underwood, Cedar Court, Perrysburg. It's really hard for me to follow that up, but just want to say, since I've been in Perrysburg, it's been a crazy political time, COVID, masks, all these things we fight about, 50-50. And things are hard, and I feel for you guys sometimes, these decisions you have to make. But this one isn't hard. Sports is a privilege. Every school I've been at, it's a privilege. If the handbook has some problem in it that says someone can commit a crime the last week of school, and then be back on the football field in the fall, it needs to be fixed. I hope you guys will be brave and address this, because this is one of those few times where everybody agrees. Everybody, left, right, straight, gay, whatever. We all agree. It doesn't matter. So I understand there's legal issues, but the sports alone, that should be an easy one. That should be an easy one. I hope you guys are brave, even if it's hard legally and you have to go to court. I hope you're brave, because that will bring this school together. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Geneva Mason.
Hi, my name is Geneva Mason, and I live on Prairie Lake Road. I am a Perrysburg graduate. My children, I have 4 of them. They graduated from Perrysburg schools. I have 8 grandchildren in the Perrysburg school system. I expect safety for them. There's gun safety, there's ALICE training. We need to institute training for students to understand what to look for, how to protect themselves, and how to react if something like this happens. I'm an advocate for youth. I've spent more than a decade raising awareness for youth to prevent trafficking. What to look for, what to listen for adults to pay attention to see what do I need to know to protect these youth. I'm asking this school board to implement not only all of what everyone else has asked for, but please set a curriculum that will help these students understand that if somebody approaches them, that they need to say something. If they see something, they need to report it, not pass it along in social media thinking it's funny. The children who committed this crime and the children who the crime was committed against, both of them have families that love them very much. I am not here to condemn anybody. I'm here to say we have to take care of our children, and we need to do that by creating a safe environment for them. I am imploring you, put a curriculum in place that helps these kids understand that they need to stand up, they need to say no when somebody approaches them, when someone threatens to put something out on social media, that they can't get out from under that threat until they're telling people. It's the same thing that happens in human trafficking, seems to be happening in this situation, where the people are just, the kids are being victimized and abused, and there's so much going on. We really got to stand up for all kids. We need to pull together, and we need to create a safe environment where everybody is as aware as we can make them about all of these horrific things that happen to children.
Thank you. Next speaker is Ms. Laura Minke.
I'm going to change it up a little bit. Quick little education for the audience. The school will be paying for it, whether or not it's here in school or somewhere else. Actually, agenda item 12.9 is the cost for juvenile detention. And I can tell you as a past board member, it is expensive no matter what. I am back here again to speak about the ASL program. Thank you, board members who insisted on finding a solution. However, there are still many questions unanswered. We have 3 days until school starts, and there are so many unanswered questions in terms of, since this is now a CCP class and we have ORC involved, are students who did not sign a letter of intent able to take this class? What about the testing criteria? Have they been able to do that since we have such a short time to get that done? There has been a period change with when this class was supposed to be, and now it is at a later time, and many students cannot take it because you'll find traditionally the kids in the higher level classes are kids who are out there looking for a challenge for themselves. Many of these kids already have AP and CCP classes that they're taking, and those were scheduled before this. I would also like to know, for my daughter alone, if this is available as a remote class. She has a very busy CCP schedule and cannot take this as a class now because of what time it has been moved to. I would also like to know what other avenues we explored as a school. You had students and parents who presented, and they gave you information on what was available. Did we talk to these other entities? Finding a solution for the school in offering a class is not necessarily finding a solution for the 30 students who were in need of that class or wanted to take that class to further their education. I urge the board, the administrators, to start having direct conversations with all of our Ohio universities regarding teachers and what we need in the future. I also suggest that you attend the job fairs on the campuses. And if that doesn't solve it, maybe we need to have a discussion with ODE in terms of what we are looking for in teachers and why people are not coming into the profession. Thank you.
The next speaker is Abigail Robeson.
Hi, my name is Abigail Robison. I am actually a resident in Bowling Green, but I have a friend who is a parent of students here at Perrysburg, and she shared this information about what is taking place here in the school system. My heart broke. So I haven't heard this yet, so I'm going to speak from a place of who has actually been where this student is. When I was 14 years old, I was sexually assaulted, and I walked the same halls every single day as the person who took that away from me. I saw that person. I made eye contact with that person. I went to classrooms with this person. I had to come face to face with this person every single day, and this left me in a place of having nightmares. My extracurriculars suffered. I suffered, my family suffered, because they didn't know what to do. The school did nothing. Even though they had the story, they had other witnesses, they had people who came to them and said, you know, this is real, this is what happened. And nothing happened. Nothing came out of it. My grades suffered. And thankfully I have Jesus to help me along with that, but I don't know where that person is. I don't know where their heart is. I don't know what trauma they face today, but I faced trauma. I lived with that trauma. And now I have the opportunity to share with you today that if this still goes through, those boys, God bless them, they have opportunities to go other places and do other things. This person that was on the receiving end, it's not the same. It is not the same thing. We have to give equal opportunity to that person, and that's not going to be an equal opportunity if they are living in fear for the rest of their life and watching over their back. That is all.
That concludes the speakers for the night. I want to thank everybody for their comments. Sincerely, this is tough when there's not much we can say as a board in this particular instance. We'll work with Mr. Osser on responses where I can. Well, thank you for the respect you showed to the board and to each other. I guess with that, I'm going to look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Ms. Larimer?
Second.
Dr. Ruffert? Roll call, please.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Dr. Ruffert.
Yes.
Mr. Pullman. Mrs. Eubank.
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. This meeting is adjourned.